You've found AHO Radio. We're authentic human outliers coming together to help heal the fear of being authentic. To bring back genuine human conversation. No hype, no sensationalism, just honest talk about the critical issues affecting society, affecting humankind. And now, here are the hosts of AHO Radio, John Krotek and Bill Protzmann. And greetings, everyone, and welcome to The Conversation. Authentic Human Outliers Radio is here to offer our audience comfort and support for being the genuine, thoughtful, amazing people that you are. To be a safe place to trade ideas without too much judgment and to model what a conversation, real dialogue, can accomplish. I'm Bill Protzmann, moderator and co-host for today's conversation. Our objective today is to expand the idea of how AHO Radio began when John Krotek and I launched it in early 2020. Authentic discussion of topics that matter most. The conversation is just that, a series of essential topical discussions. Today's show is one of them. The conversation isn't so much about the answers as it is about the process of loving the questions themselves. Then, as the poet philosopher Rilke once wrote, you will gradually, and without noticing it, live your way into the answer. Before we unveil today's topic, I'd like to introduce the team. First, my co-host, John Krotek, who proudly is recovering from COVID. John's the founder of Green Zone Hero and #Planet, and I look forward to welcoming him back to a future conversation, perhaps in a week or so. Thank you so much, John, and be well. Bringing their wisdom, courage, and healing expertise to the conversation, we're honored and humbled to welcome Steven Morrison, founder of The Spiritual Workout, and intuitive spiritual counselor, Julia Stubbe. Steven and Julia, welcome aboard.
Hi, Bill. Thank you for having us.
Oh, it's so awesome to be a part of this, you guys. I'm just so thrilled to be in this conversation with you. So unlike many discussions these days, the AHO Radio unwritten agenda is to be thoughtful, succinct, and honest. Since none of us already know the final answer to the most essential questions we ask, it's helpful to agree to cooperate or disagree with honor and service to the process, living our way into the answers. It may take us a few shows to fully explore things, so John and I want to thank you, Steven and Julia, for your generosity and vulnerable, authentic participation. Thank you.
Thank you.
Of course.
Now, the question of the week. I know that outliers like us find these things that come close to our hearts and sort of unpack the most vulnerable sides of ourselves, especially since the customers that all of us want to attract are among the most outlierish people on earth, like us. People who are willing to give it up for personal transformation, for healing. So here it is. What have you given up to achieve personal transformation? This goes beyond the things that we want, to actual stuff, to the core of who each of us are, to our real being. So let's launch off into that. I'm looking forward to hearing your stories and how you got there and maybe what you had to put aside along the way to be here now. What would those things be? What have you given up to be where you are now? Yeah. Once upon a time.
Well, for me, it was interesting when we talked about that question. When I saw the question, I was like, wow, I didn't really even think about what I've given up. It's about my journey to wholeness and becoming whole. So the things I gave up are things that enabled me to be whole. And then I was like, well, what's the thing that I would miss the most? And it would be more about relationships. So I gave up a lot of toxic relationships or unhealthy relationships or fake relationships. So that is what I miss. And I miss the most, I think, is because I don't even really know what that is a sense of having family, because the family that I grew up in was toxic. And I look at other people's family and I'm like, wow, what's that all about sometimes? So that would be where I would start for myself.
So you separated consciously from your family of origin and of course, toxic relationships. Did you know like where you were headed, or did you just know you had to put this stuff aside?
I didn't know where I was headed. I mean, I always, to me, because I grew up in with a psychotic alcoholic family. And so you became who you needed to be to survive. So you lost who you were. So it wasn't about knowing where you were. It's like, I didn't even know how to become myself. It's like I had to hit places of such lows to even want to decide to find out who I was, because it's all I knew. When you don't know what you don't know. So you don't know it can be different without, having the experience that it is different.
Does that sound familiar, Steven?
Yeah. So when I think about this question about what did I give up, I really think of it from the perspective of being an entrepreneur, living my life, having a couple of different careers, following my bliss, getting on this spiritual track, if you will, morphing my psychotherapy practice into what I now call spiritual workouts. So, there were sacrifices and whatnot along the way in order to get there. But then there I was, this thing was fully formed. It was time to bring it out into the world. I was ready, willing, and able to self-finance the whole thing. And it all went away. I lost my house, my home, my money, my stuff, my community, my health insurance, my credit rating. I mean, all of it. Kind of classic. It feels archetypal. And then even then it was like, all right, perfect storm of ridiculousness. But the good news was the very thing that I had left, my practice that I call spiritual workout, was going to be what would get me through. And P.S., it happens to be the service, the business that I'm purveying in the world. So this really will be no problem. I already have all the tools that I need. And yeah, it's annoying and all of that, but I'll be back on track here in a few weeks. Well, several months later, I was not even anywhere near the track, and I hit that classic, I swear, it's like you can open the book and see archetypally, oh yeah, that, darkest of the dark nights of the soul, after a number of dark nights, right? And then it's like, okay, maybe this is the darkest one, and it just really felt like, because nothing was working. And it's like, all right, here I am, God, right? I mean, naked, nothing left to give, pure, total, utter, complete surrender, even though I thought I had already done that.
Yeah.
And that was it. And in that moment, and this is the part I have to always remind myself, I said, clearly I'm missing something in this equation, and I'm not going to make another move in my life until and unless I feel sure, or as sure as I can be, that it's really coming from my heart and not my head.
You said, pointing to your head. I don't miss a thing, man.
Yeah, I'm still waking up here. No, so yeah, so I mean, that was it. It's just like, if it's not coming from here, I'm not doing it. And so that whole project of quote unquote getting back on track kind of did and didn't ever happen, because now I'm going down even yet another new track in terms of what I'm doing. So, yes, I gave up all of the material things, but not consciously. That just was done for me.
Yes.
But then the parts of what I gave up consciously, and this just fits in right to the work I do anyway, are just a whole bunch of beliefs. Like, oh, you have to have a place to live. You have to have health insurance. You have to have an income. Certainly, if you're going to start a business, you need about 17 or 100 other things, none of which I had. And yet, here I am with my business, feeling good, feeling strong, feeling happy, living my life, doing it all. Not at all the way that I thought, in entrepreneurial language, not at all in a best practices kind of a way, but certainly in a spiritual workout way, right? And so that's kind of what's gotten me to generally today.
There's a kind of a built-in conflict between the way it's supposed to be done and the way that we did it. And I prefer the wounded way, to be honest with you. I've read the book. There's actually a book by a guy who teaches this at Harvard or Yale someplace about the 24 things you have to do to be an entrepreneur.
Mm.
And I always, that stands in stark contrast for me to the guy who wrote the book that says, unless you're born an entrepreneur, you're never going to be one. Because there's something that comes from inside that drives entrepreneurs to innovate and do. Everybody else is just doing good business, right? Follow the rules, that's fine. Anybody can follow the rules. But I know both of you, and we're not followers. You know, we tend to be the explorers, perhaps, or definitely the wounded, having journeyed on the long pilgrimage with no shoes kind of people.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm going to do something really brave here and try to hold both your stories in my mind as we progress, like in sort of stepping through each one, because I suspect that there was a moment, right, where it didn't get clear, it just got obvious. And Steven, you've sort of described that moment as hitting bottom, like the bottom gets lower, right?
Mm-hmm.
What was like the moment for you where it sort of got clear and you knew that the only direction left was up?
Well, where my aha moment was that I knew that I had a chance to really heal.
Yeah.
I had done talk therapy. Because I had been depressed, I had been suicidal, and I've gone through all that. Was in my 30s. I had been going to a massage therapist, and because I had been in a car accident and I had severe issues with my neck and my hands and everything. And she had to take a break, and because she was getting both hips replaced.
Whoa. Okay.
So she recommended this other massage therapist, who was also did shamanic work. And she touched my heart chakra, and literally the pain shot through my back, down to my tailbone. And at that moment, I knew I was in the right place. And that's where it was like, wow, I have opportunity here to really take that, because the body holds everything. The mind blocks everything out, but the body remembers everything. And that's where the dis-ease comes from. Mm-hmm. And whatever you want to say. And it's like, so for me, that was where I was. And I, did the work with her, and she was a bulldozer. It's like, she was not about the fluff. And so each time I would go, it would be like, whoa, what's going to show up this time? But it's like, I was grateful for all that. So you found yourself broken open in a different sort of way than Steven did, right? Correct. Because it's like, for me, it's like that was in my 30s, because it's like I had gone through some failed relationships. It's like suicide, alcohol was in the family. It's like, that was in my 20s, self-destruction, not caring about myself, not having any self-worth, thinking that I was, and being that chameleon, being that whoever you had to be to survive. So I didn't even know who I really was. So this was like a moment for me, like, wow, there is something here. And I just knew. And it wasn't, I just knew, because that always sticks out to me. Yeah. I've had experiences, but not that profound, I think, where I knew something, like not in the moment. The moment broke me to a place where that new insight could sort of gently touch me in some way, but it became so fundamental, and it was so much a part of like my being that I couldn't ignore it anymore. Mm-hmm. Okay, I'm tracking. So, Steven, was there like a singularity for you where it all came like rushing in or tiptoeing in like that that's important for you?
Yes, it was not the kind of physical, undeniable thing that Julia just described. For me, I was already dealing with all this stuff. Like, here, I'm just trying to start my business, people, and it's sort of a nice thing to put in the world. Like, this should
Yeah.
be pretty easy. And again, like, even though I have all these things that got in the way, I still know how to do this, and I'm fine. I'd like, come on, we're just going to do this. And again, a few months, and it's just not happening. And for me, the moment that I now refer to as that darkest of the dark was, I was walking around, not walking aimlessly. I was just going from one place to another, and I'm just not feeling like myself. Something wasn't right. And I'm like, what is this? And I'm obsessed. Like, that's my process. Like, if something's not right, I'm going to tend to it until it goes right. And it just felt very foreign to me. What is this feeling? And I, did what you do, and I process, and I'm thinking and opening and feeling, and what is it? And then boom, unhappiness. Now, I had not really felt unhappy since I was a child. I came from not the most fun of backgrounds, just crawled my way out, was living a happy, joyful, fun, wonderful, normal American,
whatever that is,
life, whatever all that is, but I didn't have any of that. And to have realized or reached a point where I just felt unhappy, for me personally, that was massive, because it did not fit at all for how I saw myself. It didn't fit at all for, as a familiar feeling, except for the thread to my childhood. And so much of what my transformation was about was letting go of so many of those old beliefs that we have that, for me, were, I thought, not even there. But turned out they were just dormant for 30 years or so.
Oh, right, right. So there was like this wealth of untapped, whatever.
Right, and all this. So, whatever I thought I was doing for 30 years as a grown-up adult, and, changing my life and going from a reasonably unhappy person to a reasonably happy person, and, just succeeding in all the ways, then it was all gone. So what's going on here? It's and that's the work I do. It's like, well, it's not for nothing. You must have some beliefs that create this reality. And it's like, oh yeah, these beliefs from when I was 2 years old. And so that was it. It was just that feeling of unhappiness that I'm like, I'm not here to be an unhappy person. Certainly not after everything I've already done to change that.
These events happened a while ago.
For me,
to put you in your lane that you're in now. Mm-hmm. So you've both described something that is so archetypal. You use the word, so let's just use it. 40 days in the wilderness, that kind of stuff.
I wish it was more original.
Right, but it seems to be also essential for healers to go through that wounding. So at this point in the story right now, I have a question for both of you, and either one can go first. But knowing what you know now, like sometime beyond that moment that took place in each of your lives, what would each of you say to the other about that moment? If you could have been there, Julia, when Steven had that full body experience of unhappiness, like full being experience of unhappiness, what would you say to him at that moment, knowing what you know now?
Well, probably I'd just hug him.
Thanks.
Because it's like, to me, it's like just to hold the space for somebody and to allow them to explore that without expectation, and without attachment, and just to really hold the space and just, love them from your heart. Just that is what I would do, is just to be there if they wanted to explore it any further or talk about it, and just listen, just to really, really listen.
Would you have said anything, Steven? If somebody came at that moment, some physical being came and just held you and listened, would there have been anything to say?
That's a good question, because I'm not somebody who's had that experience. It's not the kind of family I came from. It's not, I mean, I'm a loving person. I have loving friends. I have, I've certainly been, hugged and held, but never at a time where I was in, my MO is always, I got this, leave me alone. I don't think I would it would just feel foreign to me. I don't think I would know what to do. Well, hopefully I'd say, oh, this is what I've been asking for. Thank you very much. I have no idea. I don't think I would push away by any stretch. And that would be a beautiful thing. That would be all you would ever ask of anybody. But I tend to be the kind of person like, oh, I got something big to deal with. I'm going to go deal with it. And then I'll come back and rejoin the human race. That's been my personal MO. I'm not saying that's the way to do it. And the work I do is very much being one of those people. But yeah, but what you described, Julia, that's exactly what a person would want, I think.
It's just to be somebody that just holds the space. And it's like, if you didn't need a hug, I could just like maybe just rub elbows with you, or just sit next to you close and, and just be there to listen if but it's like, for me, a lot of times that emptiness that we have is because we don't feel that anybody's listening, or anybody really hears us. So that's what I want to be for others. I want to be the one that's there to just listen without judgment, with the empathy that I have, and hold that space regardless of where they are or what their beliefs are. And maybe, ask questions that would make them come up with their own answers, because I wouldn't tell them that what they're feeling, could be changed or anything. I would just ask different questions that would give them the opportunity to go, oh, well, okay. And so that for me is what's important for myself to be able to do for others, as well as even when I'm in my own space and I'm like, I ask myself these questions because I don't always have, somebody else to ask them, because they're not at that point. Like they want to fix me. And it's like, I don't want to be fixed. I don't want you to fix me. I just need somebody to listen to me.
So Steven, same question. Now, Julia was facilitated. The massage therapist unlocked it. But I know this because it's happened to me, not at that profound level, I think, but it's happened to me where afterwards, like when I go home and I'm no longer on the table and the facilitator isn't there, and then it all comes flooding in, and I'm like, oh my gosh. So what would you say or be or do if you could have been present there when that awakening happened for Julia?
Well, as soon as you asked the question, it was some version of, I think, Julia's answer too, which is from where I sit, I would be like, woohoo, good for you. I wouldn't necessarily say that if she's, all lying, out, but internally, that's right. I'm like, that's fantastic. That's healing right there. And so again, then my job would just be to hold the space. Hi, how was that for you? Do you need anything? You want to talk about it? You want to, not to impose anything, of course, and just to, as Julia said, just hold the space. But I would certainly encourage her or anybody in that position to really see what's happening as a real positive. Everything is energy, and you just moved a whole bunch of energy, and that's, so what do you need? Do you need a nap? Do you need to process it? Do you need to just go take a walk? Do you need,
This deep journey is something that's supposed to happen alone. Luke is supposed to go into the cave and battle the hologram of Darth Vader or whatever, so we're supposed to do it. Okay. Well, I picked a lousy.
I'm sorry. It's like I'm just visualizing it, and it's like, oh, can I go play?
Yes, right. I mean, but okay. So you guys have done this a few times, because obviously, once you realize that there's gold at them and them are hills, then you want to do that more, even though the first time it was just like terrifying and everything, unlocked.
Well, for me, actually, the first time wasn't the most terrifying time. The most terrifying time was when I said, okay, I'm going to do this work. And I actually had an experience where she regressed me back to like when I was 18 months old. And I was actually talking baby talk, and it's like my body hurt all over, and then my head hurt, and then I couldn't breathe. And then when I came out of that, literally water just flowed out of me. We filled like 2 or 3 paper towels worth of water. And the experience was like my mom was giving me a bath. The water was too hot. And then because my father was also violent, she didn't want him to hear me crying. So she shoved me underneath the water. I hit my head and I basically drowned, and all that water came up. That was terrifying, because it's like, I was like, because like, oh, the first time with the shocker, just feeling the pain. I'm like, cool, that's all right, great, I'm excited. Go through that other experience, like, what the heck's going to happen this time? And I'm telling you, there were other moments that were like, whoa, where I would like vomit because my body was holding on to so much of that toxic energy.
Yeah.
And it was, so for me, it was like to continue on the process and to really look at that shadow, or look and integrate it, or however, or clear it or transmute it, you know, however you want to go with it. But to find who I was underneath all that, it's like, wow, it's like what that, you know, it's like, I'm still, sometimes it's like, I'm amazed that I came through all that, you know, and there's different reasons for that. Is that would probably be off topic of the show of as how that, you know, came about. But that was the scary part, because it's like to realize how much I blocked out and how violent my home life was and how toxic it was. To find all that out, that was what was terrifying, you know. And then it's like, and I didn't find that out, you know, to really, I knew it was toxic, but to really find the realities of it and what this little child went through, you know, and nobody was there for her, you know, that inner child, you know, to really work with her. I had to really work with her. And then, you know, to go from there to the forgiveness process, to forgive my mother, you know, that was a 2-year process in itself as well.
Oh, must have been. Yeah. Takes a while.
Mm-hmm.
This makes me think of an interesting, possibly sideline, but have you guys ever felt when you're in the presence of someone who's doing that work, like right there with you right now, that something might happen that you might not be able to like control or guide, or, you know, there'd be like a safety issue with anything? Do you ever feel that kind of a I don't know what that feeling might be, like a, you know, okay, universe, you've given me this opportunity to be present with this person who is healing. Am I up for it? Right? I can imagine what your massage therapist must have thought watching.
Well,
that
she
happen.
was a shaman. She was trained, and she was a bulldozer with that. So I mean, so she was like, yes, let's do more.
Yeah, bring it on, right?
Bring it on. So that was her. But for me, it's like, with my clients or my customers, however you want to say that, is like, I always follow up and make sure that they're doing okay. Cause it's like, it's not like, oh, you're, you know, time's up, we're done. It's like, it's not about that. It's like, I hold space for them continually. And I've known where somebody was struggling, and it's like, I could tell just by the message, and I would just call them. And it wasn't about receiving anything for it. It was about the responsibility of, I've held this space for you. What else can I do to get you through this? You know, whatever that is. So I just trust spirit and source that they'll just show me what I need to do. And it's worked so far.
Yeah, I would, I've not had that experience, Bill. You know, like Julia says, I trust source shows, you know, brings people in who are suited to what I have to offer. And I've never been presented with anything that I haven't already had personal, if not a lot of professional experience with. I'm not sure to date that I've ever offered in the course of my work any feedback or whatever it is that I offer up. I don't know how to characterize it, that I haven't done myself a zillion trillion times. So I'm also very comfortable, if it should happen, letting somebody know that I don't think I'm the right practitioner for you for some reason, you know. And I think we'll get into maybe some of how that works later. But
Yes.
So far, you know, that's part of what Julia's talking about, you know, for people like us to quote unquote hold space. You know, when I used to first hear that term from healer types, I'm like, what are you talking about, hold space? I don't know. What, now I have to figure out what that means and then go learn how to do it, and only to discover I was already doing that.
Doing it,
you know,
yeah.
It's really, it's not that complicated. It's just, you know, having a sense of, oh, I see what's going on. You know, it doesn't take long. The intuitive part kicks in too, you know, and somebody comes in and God bless them, you know, everybody's in their stuff and they just think, oh my God, this is the world's worst thing ever. Nobody's ever had anything like this, and da, da, da. You know, and 3 words into it, it's like, okay, I see where this is going. And then that's what holding the space means. It's like, they can just lay it all out. Maybe it'll take 2 minutes, maybe it'll take 2 months. I don't know. And it'll just keep coming. And there's always a direction in which I will bring to bear what I've got to offer, and there we go.
So, sorry, go ahead, Julia.
Well, I was just going to say, I've only had that incident that you talked about, Bill, happen one time with a client. I've had it happen interactively, like when I've gone to a workshop with other facilitators with somebody else, where it's like our core was just like knocked to shambles. And it's like, so we would end up holding that space for each other because it seemed to happen, you know, so that we could do it for each other, you know. So that's how I am aware of it, because I've worked with, you know, my co-host of my radio show, I've worked with other facilitators, and it wasn't even about a session. It was just about holding them and being there for them and moving forward with it, and then allowing them to be there for me as well. And that's the whole thing, is about that receiving and allowing somebody else to hold the space for you, and surrendering and not thinking you have to do it all alone.
This is a marvelous thread, because I'm sure in that moment, everything we've just covered was sort of foreign. When you're in that place, like you're lying there on the table, just water. Steven, you're in that, you know how it is you feel it like in your core, you're just like, you're gutted. And at that moment, there's like no knowing. There's a direction, because it's turned, like the corner's finally been turned, but the knowing of what's going to happen in 5 years, or how am I going to put this to work, is just not there. Can you take us just a little bit further down through the story of from the moment to like the next significant thing that happened?
For me, it was my orientation from the time it all just went at the very moment that I needed it all to start the business. So my orientation was just get this business back up, and it's not the business, it's all part of the same thing, because then it's my livelihood, then I'm back on track, and it's all, you know. So to answer your question, the thing that shifted at one moment was, okay, this is not going back on track. This is not about me just getting it all back to where it was. I'm on an entirely different track, and it's completely different and yet totally the same, right? I'm still doing what I'm doing in the world. I'm not giving up on that, even though I've walked to the give up line about 10 trillion times, right? So that's not happening. And yet it's not going to come to fruition the way I thought it was going to happen. And then it's like, well, of course it's not, because, you know, I'm a new consciousness guy, and I'm a new consciousness entrepreneur. And I work with people who want to do authentic, new consciousness, new paradigm from 3D to 5D businesses. So at one point it dawned on me, it's like, oh, that's what I'm doing here. I'm bringing this into fruition, it's the same thing, and I'm the same person. I'm just now doing it in a completely different way. And so that qualitatively changed my own orientation about what I was doing. And again, it's so internal because on the outside, everything looked exactly the same. I'm still doing what I'm doing in the world to get this business from in my head to out there, right? But everything about how I'm doing it and how it feels has completely changed. And it's like, well, of course, that's that's part of what I'm purveying as well. So,
Julia, how did that go for you?
Well, for me, my story is completely different than Steven's.
Good.
Because I was, I was in corporate. I was like a controller of a construction company, or I did this, an administrative assistant. So once I started doing the work, the energy work, it's like, oh, I've learned that you can do salts, the salt to clear your field. So I started my own little business there of making salt scrubs and bath salts. And I worked with creams, anti-aging creams. So that's how Wellness Treasures became that business, because it was product. It was all about product, because that's what I knew that I needed and assisted me with my process.
Right.
And then from there, I took a Reiki class, and that was huge for me in that I learned something that it wasn't even about, because the energies, I've always been gifted as far as the intuitive gifts, as far as that goes, more than I really want to be at some points in my life. But I had a session, they were doing the attunements, they were working on each other on the table, and I was on the table, and I was like ready to get up, because it's like I was getting up. And the master instructor said, well, maybe you should stay on the table. I said, no, I'm good. And it's like I came in the next day and I felt like crap. It was like, and she goes, well, that's because you weren't grounded and you got off the table and you didn't ground yourself. And I'm like, well, what's that? I didn't know. I had no idea what that was or what that looked like. Yeah. So for me to be grounded, because I've had people tell me, well, your feet never really touched the ground anyhow. I remember people telling me that through my life, because I was always out here, because that's how I survived, not being in my body, because being in my body equivalated pain, because that. So, but once I learned how to be in my body, it was enabling me more to hold my light and to become more whole and not getting hit all the time. So that was another huge thing. But that also, what that qualified for me is, other people need to know this. So that's one of the things I'm really passionate about is, it's like when people call in the radio show, or they say, it's like, I say, well, what's your grounding, clearing, and shielding routine? Do you know what that is? And we just start with that basic thing and run that energy to be able to do that, so they can see what it feels like, so they can feel or know the difference as they go. Because for empathic people, I think everybody should do it, but for empathic people, it's really, really highly important to be able to do that. So that was like the next step. But I'm still working corporate. It's like I had been working corporate, on the side most of my life till, probably 8 years ago, when Spirit said, oh, it's time to sell your house, quit your job, and move and wear your Batman tights all the time. And it's like, oh, okay. What does that look like? But and so I ended up dousing the map and ended up moving down here to Florida. And I had sustainable income from my 3D world up to a certain point. But so it's like, to supplement that, it's like, now it's like, there's the business of now, of what's happening now, and who am I attracting, and putting myself out there to be seen, because I always looked at it as I was on a covert mission. It's like one heart at a time, not being out there having to everybody see me. And it's like, well, Spirit said, it's like, okay, now it's time to get out there. I still remember when I got approached about the first radio show, the Energetic Toy Box. It's like, well, do you want to do this radio show? And it cost me money to do it. And it was like, and I'm like, and I even said to the person on the phone, I said, well, there's this huge line of fear in front of me, but I'm going to just step right through it. And same way with when I did the move, there was always that fear there, but I didn't let it stop me from what I truly believed from my heart that Spirit or Source wanted me to do.
I'm curious here, as you're both talking, that there was a time scale. There was some period of time between like the moment where it all came home and where you were sort of more fully productively engaged in what that moment had shown you was your way. is that time scale, I mean, I don't know, 40 days and 40 nights, right? That's the one we hear about, the magic number. But was there like did you know when you'd arrived at the moment that you were in the work full time, I guess is a good way of saying it? And or was it just sort of an evolutionary thing? I mean, we all like to go to school, you know, I get my master's degree and I'm an MBA and now I can go out and I can, you know, do that. But I know it's not like that for you guys. I'm just curious though, how you kind of knew when graduation had taken place.
That's why for me it's so strange, because the thing I was doing stayed the same. Like I was saying, it's just everything about how I was and how I was approaching it was changing. And so it was definitely not that so much of a moment for me at all.
Yeah, I'm probably using the wrong kind of...
Such an oozing into it of waking up one day and being like, oh, like I was saying before, like, okay, yeah, I don't even have to think about putting this train back on the track. I'm just gonna not have that frame of mind anymore, that perspective, that intention, you know, it's, but, and the thing I didn't even say at the critical point of the darkest of the dark night was, I thought the one thing I had in my life that I hadn't already given up was my work, my practice, the one thing that we're still talking about. And it seemed like, oh, that didn't seem like I was unhealthily holding on to something that I was supposed to let go of. It was the one that's part of me. There's no separation between my work and myself. That was the whole point of my life to that point, was like, I just want to do what I love in the world. I don't want to have a corporate job where I check my soul at the door, go in and do some tasks and get a paycheck. Like, I don't want to live like that. So I'd already been doing all this. And then that moment for me was, wait, you want my work too? You want like that? I'm supposed to give that up too? All right. And that was it. So it was like, how did I even miss that part? And then it just came back. It just came back. I just had to give it up. And then it was like, but I didn't know it came back and was going to be cultivated in this whole different way.
That makes sense in some crazy way to me.
In some crazy way somewhere, I hope. Yeah.
It does, because there's so many life lessons that are like that.
Well, yeah, and they're definite. I mean, I can point to definite moments, but to the question you're asking now, for me anyway, there was not any particular like, oh, that was.
How about you, Julia? Did you have?
There's no aha moment, because to me it was like it was just about touching people's lives. It's like before it became a business, it's like, because it was always a side thing. Because like I said, like 8 years ago, I would say it's like, I'm Bruce Wayne, I go to work, it's da-da-da-da-da, but then I wear my Batman tights, and it's like, and it's like, I used to have to keep my hands in my pockets, because it's like, oh, I just want to touch that person and be able to do that. So it's like, I had to learn control, because I was so excited to be able to, like, it's like, wow, it's like, I see what's going on here. It's like, yeah. And so I was like, okay. So that was a lesson for me, to be able to step back and not, like bulldoze in. So now that's why I have this more gentle approach, or it's very strong and it's very powerful, but it's gentle. It's with kindness, and it's with love, and it's with grace and with ease. And it doesn't have to have all the drama that I had to go through for my initial steps. So that's what I focus on now, is that powerful but gentleness. And it's like, it's hard for me to even explain what happens, because I let source take over, and because it's constantly about healing myself, regardless if it's, you want to call it, working or being, having clients. It's constantly about healing myself, because when you facilitate healing for others, something inside of you heals as well, because otherwise you wouldn't attract those types, or those that need for those type of people. Because it's like, I just had a client the other day, and it's like, sure, there was sexual molestation in there. There was the addiction. I'm like, that's all my story. So it's like, it gives me empathy and compassion and non-judgmental, because it's like, they only know what they know. It's like, so that's what the kind of clients that Spirit brings to me, because I have that compassion and I have that divine true love for them, because I just see their journey. I see who they really are, if that makes any sense or not.
Well, it totally makes sense.
I'm getting all teary up now.
No, I'm totally with you on this, because we talked about the things that you had to give up to be where you are now. And one of the things that you had to give up was all the relationships that weren't working. And now law of attraction is just bringing you people that are in the lane where you are able to be in relationship in a healing way. And that's 180 from where it started.
Right. Because I get to assist others, and I just like, it's like my ripples. I just don't know where the ripples go, but I just got to trust that they do what they're supposed to do.
And the same, Steven, for you. You had all this idea of what it was going to be, right? That got changed in a very significant moment, but it all came back, like kind of in a deeper way.
It actually didn't change at all. That's what's so bizarre about it. Like 10 years went by, and then there it is in the world. Other people can actually see it. It's not only just in my head, and it is precisely what I set out to do in terms of, which is, again, it's like, so the whole shift, we talk about personal transformation, right? So if you're looking at the outside of my stuff and what's out there, that's not what one sees, but only I know the shift and the changes internally that occurred, such that this thing does exist in the world, just showed up in a way that had nothing to do with what I thought it was going to be or how I thought it was going to be. It was not at all the easy, cushy, mature, responsible adult who'd already kind of been through some things and just self-financing a project in the world. That would have been simple.
Yeah.
And yet, it speaks something to the vision, the desire, the intention that truly comes from here. Like, there's nothing else for me to do in the world, but I have no money. I have no place to live. Well, who cares? You got to let go of whatever you think that means. And so the constant letting go of one belief after another, really fundamentally, is what it was, and then here it is, just as I originally intended, just a little bit later on the calendar, and don't ask
without
me
as much belief here. Right? Without all the beliefs.
Yeah. Which I didn't. Yeah.
I mean, ultimately, you didn't really give up anything.
Right.
I mean, except a bunch of baggage. I mean, it was like just setting down a bunch of, I can't run with all this baggage. So I'll just put this stuff down. And then Julia, you can come back to the relationship that was always waiting there for you. And Steven, come into the business that was always waiting there for you, right? And so the whole conversation has gone in a big circle. But it's a process circle. It's not a checkbox circle. You can't say, well, I'm going to give up this now and this now and this now. It's this cycle, isn't it?
Yeah, it's a spiral. We're on this spiral, and it's layers. So it's like when you're going to those layers, it just allows you to go to the deeper layers to find that core of who you are. And it's like, oh, there's that. It's like, oh, I didn't see that before. And it's like to be able to let that go. And not have the triggers or and to realize what a trigger is. And it's like, oh, a trigger is an opportunity for something else inside of me to heal.
I love that. Say 3 cheers for triggers.
Yep. Triggers and mirrors.
True. And Julia, I'm going to come back to what you said, grounding and shielding. I've got notes for that for the next time we get together, because I want to explore those two things in the context of what a client might experience with you. But to just sort of tie it up in a bow here, we've gone through your entire career up till now in less than an hour. But with the focus on the wounding and how that's worked to enliven the careers that you both share now and the healing that you bring to the world. So any final words of wisdom to sort of bring it right up to the present day? I love asking this question. What the audience gets to see and hear is, amazing beings considering an answer. And we don't often stop long enough these days to consider answers, right? To listen, really figure out where in the core of my being can I bring enlightenment here to the question. So I love that you take time.
Yeah, I just think it's really about being in your heart space. Just being in your heart space and having love and compassion for yourself. And then in turn, that gives you love and compassion for others.
I was actually going to say some version of the same thing. I think that's the journey we're really all on. I talked about mine earlier about really going from head to heart. And I don't know, about 100 years ago, I read something or came across that expression we've all heard, the longest journey we take is the 12 inches from the head to the heart, right? Or something like that.
Yeah, well
or
said.
It takes, and so that's really what it all boils down to. Everything about the work I do, everything about my own personal journey, everything about the work I do is about helping people to make that.
Yeah, I can agree with that too.
And so I have some personal version of what that looks like for me. Julia has hers, Bill, you have yours, John has his, everybody has their own. So if that's the general frame, then that's what we do. We just kind of hold the space for that and, in our own different ways, help people to make that, help people along their journey that they're already on, to do that piece.
I love this time to be able to sort of reflect. I feel we need much more reflection in our world today. And maybe the Quakers something have a podcast where they just sit in silence for an hour, right? I mean, right? Let's bring more of that, back to our conversation, and allow the pauses in what we are in the sounds we make to be part of the room, part of the presence in the room too.
Redefine the meaning of dead air.
Yes, exactly. Which isn't actually dead, but in our case, very much alive. I almost didn't want to jump in on that silence, but it was so beautiful. I didn't want to miss the opportunity, right? So there's me being a host again. So we're going to do this again. So this question this week, what did you give up in your journey? We're going to turn that around the other way the next time we talk about what is a client going to be giving up, essentially? What should a client expect to work with you? And you both have so amazingly different and beautiful lanes on this that you touched on just a little bit ago. I want to invite clients to sort of stand in a potential's shoes and say, hey, if I work with Steven, here's how it can go. If I work with Julia, here's how that can go. And get a feeling for what personal transformation looks like from people who've led folks through that process. So we'll do that next time. And you guys, what a pleasure. Julia, Steven,
thank you.
This has just been, I love doing this work. I really do. I don't know, something about it lights me up. I like to make music too, but this has turned out to be such a beautiful thing to facilitate these sort of squad casts, whatever they call it, and to learn and learn alongside you guys and see how you bounce off one another. And so thank you so very much for your candor and for your insight. It's just been amazing to walk toward the answers together like this. And I'm looking forward to doing that more in the future. For the audience, if you're listening right now, thank you. I'll put some things in the show notes so you'll know how to reach Julia, know how to reach Steven. We usually do a little annotated thing so you can go quickly to point, just clicking on the timestamp in the show notes will take you to that point in the actual show. And with that, you're able to just dial in on points that we made. I'm forgetting them all now, but they will be in the edit so you can see them there. And that is a really, really great thing. I want to say thank you to our sponsors, Music Care and Green Zone Hero. We couldn't do this without you guys. Thank you so very much for being a part of AHO Radio. And John, if you're out there listening right now, we love you, buddy. Just, do the good work, be well, And we'll see you when we see you next time. And most importantly, audience, thank you. You're the best part of this. Talk to you again real soon. AHO. Thank you for joining us on this episode of AHO Radio. Information we mentioned is probably in the show notes, but if we missed anything, please let us know and we'll get it added for you. Subscribe to the AHO Radio channel on YouTube to stay connected, and, as always, we wish you health, success, and significance. AHO!